Good afternoon. Welcome to the EMA building. It's good to see so many people. Before we start the session, I've been given homework, which is housekeeping, for housekeeping rules for today. So if you experience audio issues, and this is for the people online, they can't hear me now, they can't hear this message, but leave the meeting and log in again and make sure you selected the correct audio outputs. And by default, all attendees online are muted. This session is being recorded, and by participating, you agree with that. And if you do not, unfortunately, we must ask you to leave. And the presentations shared today will be uploaded on the events webpage in the upcoming weeks, together with the sessions recording. So if you can't follow both days, you always have the opportunity to look back at the recordings. And participants online are requested to submit their questions via WebEx at the dedicated Q&A tab or by raising their hand in WebEx. And questions will be answered during the dedicated question and answer slot at the end of each session. Then the health and safety announcement, I'm going to keep it very short because otherwise you have to look at slides and all that sort of thing. In the event of an alarm, you should follow people wearing blue badges, and in the back there's Sylvia, and we've got other people in here. So make sure you follow the right people. They will escort you the shortest way out of this building, and I hope it stays dry then if it happens. It's always a nuisance if it happens during the meetings. So having done that, I think we can open this Innovation Day. The Innovation Day, I'm afraid the program that we're going to deliver will be opened by me. You will hear my presentation. It will be chaired by me. I will chair the panel discussion. We'll do the fireside chat tomorrow. So there's a lot of me today and tomorrow. But we do have an excellent list of speakers as well that will fill in the gaps between me talking. And before we start with the first presentation, I would have to say that I'm really delighted to see so many people here in the room. We always try to do these meetings in connection to CVMP week, so that we have CVMP members here in the room as well with us. I see a lot of people from industry. It shows that there is huge interest in innovation in veterinary medicinal products. When I last looked, we got 150 people approximately online. We got 440 people registered. So with that type of interest, I have high expectations on what the output will be, and I can understand that the expectation is there on your side as well. So I trust we can deliver. We've developed a program. Sorry, Frank, I'm gonna hijack your agenda. All around the themes that we think are connected to innovation. So in the first session, the Veterinary Innovation Agenda, we will have a national perspective on innovation, and we have a speaker, Valentino, sitting next to me, who will tell us about the EU Innovation Network for Human Medicines. I've been trying to find out prior to this meeting whether there was such a thing as EU Innovation on Veterinary Medicines Network, and there isn't. And I think that's actually a missed opportunity. So learning from the human side and see how we can bring that on the veterinary side, I think if that is one of the outcomes of today's meeting, it would already be something. Then the next session this afternoon will be on support to innovative veterinary medicines. Presentations by the EMA team largely and by a CVMP member on what we have in place in tools to promote and support innovation. Then at the end of the day, we have a panel discussion on availability of medicines, focusing also on unmet medical needs as one of the drivers for innovation. At least that's why we've included it in the session today. In between, we'll have a break where you have networking opportunities, and I invite you to use that not to go to the people you already know, but to try and liaise also with those people you would be interested in talking to. Tomorrow, we'll do a deep dive in three support structures that the agency provides. Small and Medium Enterprise Office, Innovation Task Force, and Academia Liaison. On the veterinary side, we are desperately looking also for more input and more connection with academia. And it's proven to be very difficult for the agency to organize that. And maybe because regulatory and research are too far apart. I don't think they are, but it's certainly one of the reasons why we do see this as a challenge, and we do need that input from academia. And so I hope that that can inspire as well, that presentation. Then we'll hear a presentation from the industry on practical implementation of what the new veterinary regulation has brought us. And we end with, it's pointed here in the agenda, a panel discussion, but it's actually a fireside chat, a dialogue between myself and Karel Dumarchis-Savas from Health for Animals on innovation. So I think with that, we can present you an interesting program. It's different from other years that we've done this. It's different from an info session that we would normally do around this time of the year. And we would love to hear your feedback after today and tomorrow to get a better understanding of what we can do to improve our delivery on this. And with that, I would like to formally open the Innovation Day and start with the first session. And I'm not going to announce myself. I trust that everybody knows who I am, but that may be not the case. I haven't introduced myself. Ivo Klaassen, the head of the Veterinary Medicines Division here at the agency. And when I'd like to give a bit of background on why we have this Innovation Day now. When I joined the agency 7 years ago, my first big meeting with industry was the Innovation Day. That had been planned before I joined the agency. It was in April. I'll never forget that meeting. It was in the old London building. And my first public appearance was sitting in front of a big room, one of those big rooms that we had in London, 200 people with red badges, red lanyards. I didn't even realize what it was at the time, in there looking at me and looking curious at me and thinking, what is this guy going to deliver in the interest of the veterinary network? 7 years later, I thought it would be a good time to look back at what have we collectively delivered and how can we move to the future. And I think this is what I would like to leave after this meeting and after I leave the agency, is a better understanding of how can we further promote innovation and in connection to that, availability of veterinary medicines, because that's what it's all about. And with that, I would like to start my presentation, which bears the title, Reflections on Innovation in Veterinary Medicine. Veterinary Innovation Day. I already mentioned the first Innovation Day that I attended was held on 19 April 2018, and it covered overviews of the legislative framework, available support tools, and interactions with stakeholders. And you will see some of these items coming back on today's agenda. I've asked myself a few questions when I was preparing for this presentation. And the first question is, what progress have we actually seen since 2018, since we had that Innovation Day? And which predictions did not materialize? So what did we not see? And most importantly, because we've worked a lot on the implementation of the Veterinary Regulation 2019-6, which was aiming at promoting innovation as well, amongst some other objectives. What was the impact of this Regulation 2019-6? Can we see it already? Is it out there in the open or not? It became applicable in 2022. We're now 3 years later. What have we seen? And then my last bullet point was, should we attempt to predict the future again? So should we again try to look forward? And I did that at the most recent VICH meeting, which was held here in Amsterdam as well in November last year. So I'll probably going to borrow a few slides from that as well. I'm going to see if this works. It works. What you see here is a timeline. It begins in 2018, and then it moves to 2024. And I've taken the data from our veterinary highlights. So these are data about actual products, actual progress that we've made. What you see, if you can read the slides, are the number of positive opinions. So that's new products coming to the market, and the number of new active substances. And new active substances, in my view, would be a sign of innovation. And you see that over the years, there's quite some variety in there, but we've seen quite a large number of new active substances. 2024 is a bit an odd one out if you look at it. It had 25 positive opinions, but only 2 new active substances. And that is because in 2025, we've seen a lot of vaccine combinations entering into the market, which would not necessarily contain new active substances, but which were new combinations. But if you look, for example, at 2023, you see 9 new active substances out of 14 products rated. The next question, obvious question is, what sort of products are we looking at when we look at new active substances? Vaccines. Most of them are vaccines. Over the years, we see new vaccines, which are needed because they're often for new indications, but very often it's vaccines because people want to bring that to the market. And in addition to those vaccines, we saw some innovation, some new products, real new products. So in 2018, most notably stem cells. It was the first year that we authorized stem cell products for horses, which was a real technical innovation in the veterinary area. In 2019, we saw a medical device combo, I would say, which was also new. You could look at it as innovation. Monoclonal antibodies in 2020 for pain treatment. But we had seen monoclonal antibodies already authorized before. In 2022, again, stem cells and a plasmid DNA vaccine. We had seen a plasmid DNA vaccine before, stem cell. So overall, my first impression was a bit disappointing in what we had actually managed to get innovation in the 7 years. I was expecting more. And innovations that we didn't see or didn't materialize yet, bacteriophages, they've been on the agenda for a long time. New antimicrobials, but I don't expect anyone to really invest in that, certainly not for veterinary purposes, but I can say also on the human side, it's been quite cumbersome to develop them. And we know we need either new antimicrobials or alternatives to antimicrobials, because AMR, also one of the major objectives in the veterinary regulation, and also for the new pharma legislation, an important one, is the health crisis of the future. And if we don't manage that in a One Health approach, obviously, then if we don't invest in that area, then we have a problem as Europe, as the world. Immunomodulators as also potential alternatives to antimicrobials. mRNA vaccines, we haven't seen them yet being authorized. But when you see the success of the mRNA vaccination campaign on COVID, and when you were visiting vaccine conferences after that, you thought mRNA vaccines are the future. They're going to resolve all the issues. Well, obviously they're not, because otherwise we would have seen the market would have been flooded by mRNA vaccines, and that's not been the case. Which is not to say that they're not in the pipeline, and they will come, I'm sure. But those are, and it's not a complete list. There's more things that we thought we would see that we haven't seen yet. In the timeline slide, you could also see the moment when the new regulation 2019-6 was introduced, which was 2022. What's the impact of the new? I still call it new regulation. But what's the impact of the veterinary regulation? It contained elements of regulatory innovation. The Annex 2 with specific chapters on novel therapies, a different way of definition of the different categories of medicines. Vaccine antigen master file, vaccine platform technology master file, real regulatory innovations, limited markets, replacing mums, maybe not a real innovation, but certainly directed to get more products to the market. And to support the technical innovation, the agency, not necessarily linked to the regulation, but since 2017 it has been in place and it still is in place. What we look at is what is being presented to ITF, what is being presented as a scientific advice. What can we learn from business pipeline meetings that we started a few years ago? So for us to get a better understanding of what are innovations coming our way, and what is the regulatory toolbox that we need to develop. And we've seen innovations there, but they have not yet delivered, as I mentioned in my previous slides. But having said that, we know that there are currently submissions with innovative products. So my expectation is that 2025, 2026, we will see more innovative products entering the market, possibly as a result of the implementation of Regulation 2019-6. And then let's not forget there's other ways how you can look at innovations, innovation in treatments. And for that, we're thinking about new indications. Old substances with new indications could be innovations in treatment, real new indications, I would say. If you look at innovation in treatment, I'm also thinking about drugs that are used on the human side, cancer drugs, for example, that may find their way into the veterinary arena. Innovation, maybe when you look at it as a new active substance, veterinary, but not necessarily in the substance itself. And this is the topic of the panel discussion at the end of the day. Identification of unmet medical needs. I don't know who of you have seen the FDA innovation agenda, and we originally had invited the FDA colleagues to be here and present on their innovation agenda, but given the situation in the United States, they unfortunately had to decline. That is not an innovation agenda driven by US government, driven by FDA, based on what they identified as unmet medical needs. They said, we've looked at the veterinary sector, we see that there's a reason why we should have these products available, and we're going to help and stimulate the industry to develop them. Totally different approach from what we do in Europe. I've put this slide in because I felt that for me, this is also one of the quintessential drivers of why we need innovation. And innovation is to boost the competitiveness of the European Union overall, both on the human side and on the veterinary side. EU has developed initiatives or is developing initiatives that will support that competitiveness of the European Union. So work is being done currently on the Biotech Act, which are targeted actions to boost biotechnology and biomanufacturing in the European Union. And if that Biotech Act materializes, it identifies the challenges and the barriers that there are and proposes to tackle them. On competitiveness, there's EC communication on the long-term competitiveness of the European Union. There's the Draghi report, which I'm sure most of you may have read, because that's very much about competitiveness. It tries to address the challenges faced by industry and companies in the single market. And there's a development of competitiveness compass, which is the roadmap to restore Europe's dynamism and boost economic growth. And I think we can benefit from that also on the veterinary side. And on the left side, you will see the same repeated there. This is a last-minute inclusion in this presentation because I felt, if you don't understand the context in which we discuss innovation, we're missing out an opportunity. Where are we going with veterinary medicine's innovation? And this is a combination of two slides that I used during the VICH conference last year. I don't have a crystal ball. That was my introduction there. I don't think anyone has, but there are a few things that we can see. And so innovation in treatment, what do I think about in the context of veterinary medicines? Personalized medicines, AI, telemedicine, also in the veterinary domain? I think so, yes. I think it will come in combination with diagnostic assays, certainly for companion animals, that will deliver and will bring innovation. Technical innovation driven by new products, novel therapies, but also by 3Rs, supported by regulatory guidance, hopefully. And then regulatory innovation, also needed, because not everything that we now currently have in the regulation is necessarily driving innovation. I've always said regulation should follow the science, and I'm a strong believer in that. If the scientific developments and developments in new products force us to look again at regulation or at requirements, we should be able to do that. I've introduced here as a new point regulatory sandboxes, because the regulatory sandboxes are also mentioned in the Biotech Act. On the human side, they're mentioned in the proposal for the new pharma legislation. I think it's a great tool that we could also benefit from on the veterinary side. And we should look into, can we do that within the given regulatory framework? Is it new? How can we make it fit? Real world data, real world evidence, and I would like to refer to the big data strategy. We should try to minimize regulatory blockers. At the same time, of course, we're as regulators responsible for quality, safety, and efficacy of the products. I always like to emphasize that industry and regulators both want the same. They want availability. They want new therapies being brought into the market. But industry may be profit driven. We are driven by our commitment to protect consumers and animals. Improve processes to remove unnecessary administrative and regulatory burden. And the new commission of the DG Sante has really stressed that he would like to see that as well, to support competitiveness of Europe. And last but not least, but I don't think there's any complaints on that, which is regulatory efficiency and predictability. We can improve on efficiency. I'm pretty sure people will challenge me on that. I do think in Europe, when I look at the benchmarks that are being done by Animal Health Europe, we have a high predictability of regulatory processes. And all this can support innovation, but the innovation itself, that's something we can't do. That's where the industry has to invest, whether with academia or public, private funding. There's all sorts of possibilities on which you can do that. And these were my reflections on the innovation as a start of the Innovation Day. We have the question and answer session at the very end of this meeting. So I would like to hand over now for the next presentation to Frank Fouret, who is sitting next to me. Frank is the head of the French agency for medicinal products. Frank, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Ivo, for this very stimulating introduction, I think, and thank you and congratulations for the organizer. I'm really delighted to be there and to have this innovative approach, I think, or maybe disruptive approach to begin an Innovation Day with a national perspective on innovation. I think it's quite disruptive. And you may ask why I find it disruptive. And maybe if I can handle the technology. So you can ask the question, why do I find it disruptive or innovative to begin with this perspective of national competent authority? My first answer will be that you all know, as an insider in the regulation, veterinary regulation, that obviously the new regulation gives to EMA a very central role in innovation, because she is responsible for assessment of all innovative VMPs. So my challenge today, and I think an external observer may think that a national competent authority will play maybe a second division part in this play. And I would like to convince you, but I think it will be easier because you are not external observer, but insiders, that in fact, in reality, the National Competent Authority has a very important role, a very important part to play in innovation. And maybe I will focus on 2 points. One which has been already addressed by Ivo, which is the real importance of the relationship with the stakeholders. And when I speak of stakeholders, I'm speaking of stakeholder in the broad sense, industry obviously, but also startup, academia, and veterinarian, and other national competent authorities. And I will have a focus a bit more iconoclast on the tiny national sandbox we have in the new veterinary regulation. So let's begin with the relation with stakeholders, and first industry, startup, and academia. As you know, as an agency, we have some important and strict deontology rules and principles, but I really think it's completely, it's huge and really important to have and to maintain this relationship with stakeholders. So in our agency in France, we try to frame a kind of relationship which is really strong within our deontological framework. And so we have first meeting with our French VMP industry representative, the STMV. And we have an annual meeting every year. So last one, it's every year in January. And last one, we have 60 representatives of industry in a face-to-face meeting. And I think it's a very good point. It shows that this contact and this relation is something really important for industry. In addition of this annual day, we have also 4 general meetings with the board of the SCMV and 6 thematic meetings per year. And it's really important for us to exchange with the industry. And I quote them because some of the thematic meetings, like the one on new alternative methodology or the one on good clinical practices, are really focused on innovation. But we have also, in addition with this contact, very strong contact and frequent contact with the French representative of VMP industry, we have a lot of meetings requested by firms. And you can see on the right of the slide the number of the meeting, and you can see it improves a lot because it was around 20 in 2016, and now it's around more than 40. So it shows there is a very huge demand from industry to have a contact with stakeholders. And when I give a look to the content of these meetings, you can see that innovation is a core process of this meeting, because obviously we have pre-submission meeting on every type of dossier, but we have a lot of topics in this meeting which are really dedicated to innovation. A lot of overview of the pipeline of industry, which is really important to us to understand what is the future of the VMP. And we have also a lot of discussion about a research and development project, and at an early stage, I will say. And that's our role, I think, at that point to discuss with industry and to give them information about when and they have to request a meeting with the Innovative Task Force of the EMA. We ask also, we just give advices also when we think a scientific opinion may be a good start. So I think most of this meeting have an innovative focus. Another point I would like to make is, as you know, our staff is participating in a lot of webinar and congress organized by Learn Society. But we decided 2 years ago to participate in a new congress, which name is BioFit. And this congress is a special congress dedicated to innovation, and he wants to gather startup, industry, and academia together. And at the beginning, we have decided that was a very, very early stage of development of solution, and then we decided not to go. And we switched our mind 2 years ago, and I really see how it has been very fruitful, because there was very in-depth discussion with scientists from industry and from academia during this congress. And I see that my staff understood really better the constraint of the scientists from industry and academia in this specific thematic of innovation. And if I can give an example of their more open-minded approach in clinical trial, for instances, following these discussions they have during this Congress, they have accepted to give some authorization for proof of concept studies under clinical trial status in some special cases with no GMP batches, for example, or for use of non-laboratory animals. And I think it was really helpful for industry and also for us to set up our mind about this topic. But I think you know very well the interaction with industry, and I would like to stress more the interaction we have with veterinarians. We set up, I think 10 years ago, a special committee of veterinarian experts. It's a small committee of 12 veterinarians. It's not a very big committee. Half of them are practitioners and half of them are academics. And I think it's quite challenging because they raised a lot of questions about the regulation and how to apply the regulation on the field. But we have also a lot of questions for them, and really the interaction of the academic and practitioner together with the regulation agency is quite fruitful. And in addition to this 4 meetings a year with this committee, we have every 2 years a meeting with vet specialists of different species in order to map the unmet medical need we had in France. And we publish the list, which has been approved by this group, and we try to decide about an action plan in order to solve this problem. And you can see on the slide, species by species, the number of unmet medical need which has been identified. And you see in the green color the one which are solved or in process to be solved. And what I can see, for instance, if I take the example of the cattle and the bovine sector, the four unmet medical need which has been solved during the past 2 years has been solved with new market authorization, and 3 of them have been sold with this market authorization, but with a transition period with an emergential authorization, which was possible within the frame of the former directive, but which is not possible with the new regulation. So that's a kind of concern for us. Just this small slide to say, if you are interested in this mapping, which is available in English, you can go to the website from the French Animal Health Network, where you can find this mapping. And I really think, and we have a very good feedback from industry saying that this mapping is very useful for them. And last but not least of our relationship with stakeholders, I think other national competent authorities are really important. And I will start with something which is not obvious, is that, as you know, maybe the French Veterinary Medicinal Product Agency is a small agency of 100 people, but we are within a bigger agency, which is the ANSES. And in this agency, you have, I think, 400 scientists in our reference laboratory working on animal health diagnosis, but who have some very interesting strain of bacteria and viruses, and some of them work on new vaccine, and you may have heard about a new possibility of vaccine for African swine fever vaccination. But they also, some of them work about vaccination of wildlife, and they have facilities to make some study for minor species in the VMP field. So that has been the case for vaccination of the ducks against highly pathogenic avian influenza. So we have strong relationship with our reference laboratory, but I really think that's a point within our own agency we have to strongly develop. And in other national competent authority, I think our French colleagues from the Human Agency are very important for us, and we have strong relationship about innovation. We organized in the 3 last years some workshop on novel therapy, one on monoclonal antibodies, one on phagotherapy, and at the end of this month, we have a new workshop on environmental risk assessment, and this time is more the veterinary part. We will present how we deal with environmental risk assessment to our colleagues from the human sector. You can see on the right part of the slide, they have a special platform for innovation and orientation in the INSM, and the number of requests is far beyond our number. And you can see there in 2024, it was around 400 requests in the innovation platform. So I think we have a lot to learn from them. And I didn't quote it in the slide, but there's also all the national competent authority from all the country, our veterinary colleagues. And I think there is something we can think together about the repartition of the competency around innovation, which is an important topic. Then I will, so I hope I convince you that relationship with stakeholders is something which is really important for us, and we invest a lot in that part, maybe not sufficiently, but we will try to do our best to improve. But it's, I think, a very important point, not only to foster innovation, to answer questions, to guide industry in the regulation process, but also for our staff to understand better the constraint and to build, I think, trust and an open-minded about innovation. And then I will come to my more iconoclast position about the sandbox, the tiny sandbox we have in the new regulation about innovation. And I will take the 2 examples. The first one will be the health situation, the Article 110. And I won't describe the whole picture here, but you have on the left all the possibility for giving an authorization under the new regulation on veterinary products. And if you go for the common VMP, you have obviously a lot of green color, which means that a national competent authority can address this request. And for innovative product, as you see, for the national column, you have only one possibility, which is Article 110. And only for immunological products, obviously, and for a reduced list of diseases which are quoted in the regulation. So it's a very tiny sandbox we have on that point. But I don't know if I can say we have been lucky or unlucky, but you all heard, I guess, about the situation in France around avian influenza and the decision of our ministry to make a compulsory vaccination of dogs. And as there were no available solution for dogs in the network, in the portfolio of authorized product, we received two candidates for this vaccination, and one of them was a candidate with RNA messenger autoreplicant vaccine. So we had to address and to assess a dossier for a very innovative product. And the good part, we try to stick at the most on the market authorization procedure, but in the Article 110, we have more flexibility. And so we try to make some regulatory innovation. And the first one was to authorize a sequential submission of the dossier in order to be faster, to be more fast. The first that was useful. So we receive, for instance, in this dossier, the part 1 and 2, and we wait the efficiency or the safety study to be completed, but we begin the assessment without a complete dossier. We obviously have some flexibility, because we have a complete dossier for part 1 and 2, but for part 3 and 4 we can decide if the requested study or not, and we were authorized with a very short timetable, because I think we assess it in 40 days when the dossier was completed. So it helped us a lot to be very reactive in this very innovative product. And I think it has been very helpful for the team. And I think the interaction with industry was really, really good and really valuable. So, and my last example will be about tailor-made VMP. As you know, there is a definition of VMP in the regulation, but the scope of the VMP regulation is only for industrially prepared VMP. And in France, we decided that we didn't wanted any VMP out of scope of regulation, so we set up a special regulation for tailor-made VMPs. It's in our public health code, and it's quite simple. It just says that the manufacturer should be authorized by the agency. It should have a qualified person. There is still pharmacovigilance obligation for this product, and we have to set up, and that's very challenging, and we didn't do it for now, special GMPs for these tailor-made products, which is not really simple. And within the frame of this regulation, French regulation, we give the first authorization for a phage therapy platform in order to sell tailor-made phage therapy. And I give you a very easy and simple description of the process, with a diagnosis at field level by a vet, a sampling of the bacteria, and then a manufacturing process with isolation, identification, test of the cocktail of phage, which can be useful, and the quality control in order to have a tailor-made treatment of bacteriophages. So I think with this small example of the tiny sandbox we have at the national level, I think we could address that two of the points that has been raised by Ivo in this introduction, like bacteriophage and RNA messenger, has been addressed in a very short timeline. So I think it's quite useful and practical. So I will conclude, and I hope I will convince you that the national level is an important level in order to, in the innovation process. Obviously, EMA is a pivot point for innovation, but we also have our part to play, and I think that all NCA is willing to participate to this process. And my final thought will be that we have this tiny regulatory sandbox, and I think a wider regulatory sandbox will be useful at national level and will prove to be very valuable for everyone. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Frank. That deserves an applause. I agree. No, thank you very much. And I remember we discussed the examples you were going to give here when we prepared for this session. And my first response was, these are innovative products, they should come to the EMA. So, but you tackled it very nicely. And the reason why I've asked Frank to present on innovation and a national perspective is actually linked to the next presentation, because that's about the EU Innovation Network, which we don't have on the veterinary side. I've been looking for that, we couldn't find it, and then fortunately Frank was prepared and able to present it from a national perspective on what they're doing to support innovation. I think we see some very clear examples there. I would like to move on to the next presentation, which is on the EU Innovation Network for Human Medicines, and that presentation will be by Dr. Valentino Cordo. She's been working in the agency since 2022, a biomedical scientist by training, and she works in the Regulatory Science and Innovation Task Force, where she coordinates early support activities for innovative medicine and technology developers. And she's here to make you all jealous of what they have on the human side. So pay attention.
Yes, thank you so much, Ivo, for this introduction. So I will directly dive into this talk on the European Innovation Network, which is a working group that was created in 2015 by the heads of medicine agency, HMA and EMA, with the scope of strengthening actually the collaboration between the national competent authorities and EMA on all those regulatory matters that are related to the development of innovative therapies, but also to all the technology that are associated to the development of innovative medicinal products. The EUIN is co-chaired by one representative from the National Competent Authority, and currently is Lawrence O'Dwyer from the Irish Medicine Agency, and one representative of the EMA Innovation Task Force, currently Val Kamen. And it counts, as of today, 23 representatives from NCAs from 22 member states, and we at EMA provide scientific and administrative secretariat to the group. The mission of this group is try to address gaps in regulatory support tools to innovation in order to promote the translation of research into innovative therapies. And in the next slide, you see here our main goals. So as I mentioned, the promotion and translation of innovative research in Europe into actually authorized medicinal product. But also we try to capture and monitor emerging science, trends, technologies, so that we can better prepare for those. And we try, linked to this second activity, also to try to support the development of expertise, capacity within our European regulatory network. And the activity of this group are also meant to facilitate the delivery of the European Medicine Agency Network strategy. Last but not least, all these activities are trying to really support and increase the competitiveness of the European innovation ecosystem. And we try to do so by enhancing actual interactions between medicine and technology developers, regulators, and their stakeholders. Every year, the activities of the European Innovation Network are compiled in a work plan that is presented for approval both at HMA and EMA. And you see in this slide a snapshot of the work plan for 2025. And in the next few slides, I would like to highlight some of our activities, objectives, and some of the achievements so far. So I'll start with our core activity, the promotion and translation of innovation, what we like to say, from bench, from research to bedside. And since we are a group of regulators, we try to provide a platform where best experiences and practices can be shared by different regulators in order to improve our support to innovative developers. But also, one of our aim is to increase the impact and outcome of this European-funded project, also by trying to involve competent authorities in such projects. So we try to raise awareness among our network of all relevant national or European projects, programs, funding calls where competent authorities could be involved. Last but not least, one of the objectives under this activity is also to promote multinational and collaboration between academic, non-for-profits and regulators. And in 2025, the European Innovation Network will support the activity of a new initiative, the European Platform for Regulatory Science Research, a platform that will bring together academic developers and regulators. You see on the left side of the screen a picture of the European Innovation Network. We were hosted by the Italian Medicine Agency last November, where the UIN organized a multi-stakeholder workshop around the theme of translating innovation into access for advanced therapy medicinal products. And it was the chance to bring together researchers, industry, regulators, but also patient representatives, HTA bodies, to discuss the challenges related to the development of advanced therapy medicinal product. Another fundamental activity for our network is horizon scanning. And for horizon scanning, we mean try to identify not only emerging trends, technology for which we should prepare for, but also try to identify challenges that might impact and delay the development of innovative therapies. And we try to identify these topics, highlight the challenges, and upon selected topics, we draft deep dive reports. You see on the left side of the slide the reports that have been published. They are available on the EMA website. And through this report, we try to summarize the current state of art on the topic, emerging trends, challenges from a regulatory point of view, and we also try to formulate recommendations so that this challenge can be overcome. And in this year, the UIN will start the drafting of two new reports on two new topics. As you might be aware, and you will hear more in the following session, currently in Europe, we have quite some available regulatory support tools, both at national level and centrally here at EMA. But sometimes we acknowledge that for medicine or technology developers, it might be a little bit difficult to understand which one applies for their case, where they are supposed to go first. So one of the aims of the UIN will be to provide a clear guidance document outlining all the available support tools and a sort of explanation, especially for those developers like academics or a small company that might be less familiar with the regulatory world. Moreover, the UIN will move forward a pilot project called Simultaneous National Scientific Advice, or SNSA, that I will explain a little bit more in detail in a minute, as an additional support tool. Last but not least, we're aiming this year to actually engage with our stakeholders and ask how they feel about these support tools and how these support tools could be even improved and optimized. Going back to the Simultaneous National Scientific Advice, or SNSA in short, this pilot project started in February 2020 and finished last December. And it aimed at providing the chance to a medicine developer to obtain a scientific advice from more than one national competent authority at the same time. So the idea behind this pilot was to find a way to provide a more efficient but also consistent advice, and at the same time having the chance to share expertise among regulators within different NCAs. The pilot project was quite a success. More than 100 applications were received. Developers had the chance to propose questions across the medicinal product life cycle, but we saw that there was an increase in questions related, of course, to the clinical developmental phase. And one example of a recurrent question was topics regarding planning a clinical trial that would run, for example, in more countries simultaneously. The pilot is finished, however, SNSA will not stop, and the procedure will be optimized in 2025. Last but not least, there is a subgroup within the UIN that is called Borderline Classification Group. And this subgroup gathers regularly to discuss borderline classification cases. And there might be some issues with classification, so that a product could be considered borderline, when given its nature is not really clear whether the product is covered by only one regulatory framework. For example, it could be not clear whether an innovative product is actually a medicinal product or a medical device. Or it could be, is it a medicinal product or a food supplement? And this borderline classification group gathers monthly to discuss these cases and to share actually the perspective of different NCAs. The group does not have any mandate to provide an official opinion on the products. However, it is a really good chance for regulators to learn from each other, to share their point of view, and it has quite had an impact on our activities. Moreover, this group had the chance to provide some input on the draft of the new EU pharmaceutical legislation. The group also monitor and discuss ongoing legal cases on classification, and is also strengthening its collaboration with other European groups working on classification, for example, with the European Commission. In the graph, you see a summary of the borderline cases that the group discussed in 2024. And it's mainly human product, but there is also a minority of veterinary products discussed. One example was a case where there were doubts on whether the product presented was a medicinal product or a biocide. So veterinary product could also be discussed if the national competent authorities that are part of this group have also veterinary medicinal products under their remit. And I think this is my last slide, so I hope that is in this short presentation I could give you an overview, a flavor of what the European Innovation Network is, and I'm happy to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks to your excellent presentation, we've been brought back in time a bit. There's now sometimes scheduled in the agenda for question and answers, but we've been, it's 3 o'clock. I suggest that we take a few questions, if there are, right now, and then we continue with session 2 in the program, which involves a bit of a dancing around with people's speakers. Any burning questions on the presentations we've had? The one on national activities to support innovation in the veterinary area, and the other one on the European Innovation Network. And if you ask for the floor, Roxanne, could you please introduce yourself if that's needed?
Yes, thank you. My name is Roxanne Feller, Head of Animal Health Europe. Just maybe a question to the last speaker. I didn't see systematically or very often the role of companies in there. Or state industry representatives. And I was wondering then, how do you get your concrete cases in, how do you assess those when industry is usually one of the main players? Or maybe I missed something.
No, thank you for the question. I think it's a good point to clarify. So the European Innovation Network is a regulators-only platform. However, the cases we discuss come, for example, from the innovation offices at the national competent authorities or from the innovation task force, where we present innovative cases. Moreover, often we have been conducting surveys So that's how we get the question, topics, feedbacks from our stakeholders, or workshops, webinars. We had one last year in November that it was a face-to-face in Rome, but also broadcasted. So that's how we get also the involvement of medicine developers. So it's not directly in the group, but it's through our activities that we get the feedback of developers.
Then, if there's no more questions, I would like to ask the speakers for session 2 to join us here at the table. And thank you both for speaking. And then we can continue with session 2. So Noemi, Jacqueline, and Vladimir. Oh, sorry, I couldn't see that. There's a question. So we always go in order of those questions that have received the most thumbs up. So the first question is, meeting unmet medical need is key for industry innovation. Accelerating this in the EU for major species and major indications in the absence of conditional licensing pathways in the EU is difficult. How can we address this within Regulation 2019-6? Now, we've got big brains on regulatory affairs in the room. So, Emily. I know I take you by surprise, but noblesse oblige.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Emily Drury, head of the department that includes regulatory affairs. I was just looking at this question, and I think it's a good question. What comes to my mind is that when we are in a situation of critical unmet medical need, when we are in urgent circumstances, we have the flexibility under exceptional circumstances to accept a tailored dossier, which we have, and especially recently, been assessing, I would say, in fairly record time. That's where the flexibility is. And the flexibility is also within novel therapies, where we can have, again, within the boundaries of the definition of novel therapies, we have flexibilities that can be applied to data requirements. So I would say off the top of my head, those are the two legal bases where we've got flexibility to play with. And then I throw the ball back into the court if anybody else would like to pick it up.
No, I think you've described it right, but I think in principle it's not called conditional licensing, but it is a license or an authorization where there may be conditions connected to it for post-authorization surveillance. I hope that answers the question for now. So we don't have that concept of conditional licensing firmly embedded into the regulation. I think that's the right answer. I will take the next question as well. Where can we find guidance on how to request and organize business pipeline meetings for VMPs? It's a very good question. We've offered pipeline meetings in recent years to the bigger innovative industry. So if you go to the website, you will not find for veterinary pipeline meetings specifically those instructions. However, we are happy to receive requests. You can send them to Noemi sitting next to me directly, and then we will consider whether that is suitable for a pipeline meeting. We've started with bigger innovative industries because very often they have more products in the pipeline which bring challenges to us. And we have not yet expanded that to smaller industries where we feel that ITF meetings are more appropriate to look at specific individual products that they may have in the pipeline. So the pipeline meetings are really meant to get an overview of what is coming our way, both in quantity of applications that we can expect over the coming years. And so we're not interested in a single application from a single company, as well as in products that may pose regulatory challenges for the eventual evaluation. So I hope that clarifies. And with that, I would like to close this session, and we will reply to the other questions that are put in the chat in a different way. Thank you very much, Valentina and Frank, again, for being here. So you see on the right side of me, there's a whole lineup of speakers that can't wait to take the floor in session 2, which is support to innovative veterinary medicines. So the opening presentation will be by Noemi Garcia del Blanco. She's the head of the bio team in the veterinary medicines division, and she will give an overview of the tools available from EMA. Noemi, please.
Thank you, Ivo, and good afternoon to all. I think my presentation follows nicely from Ivo's introduction and the reflection on the progress probably since the last Innovations Day, as he said, but also and especially since the implementation of the current regulation, and see how we have progress and what support tools and frameworks we have and structures we have in place to to support innovation. Let me try if I can. Yes. So support to innovation, what are we referring to, and what is the main objective, the main goal for all of us, for the network, would be to foster the registration, authorization, development, and hopefully authorization of innovative veterinary medicinal medicines of adequate quality, safety, and efficacy. So what areas can innovation be referring to? And I have just highlighted some of them. I will go through each of them in separate them and refer to some examples of, again, tools and structures in place to support them. Of course, they all overlap, so some of them will be relevant for probably all of the areas, or at least some of them. So as you can see, we're referring to innovative vaccines, of course, novel therapies and technologies, novel approaches to meet unmet needs, and regulatory innovation, which was also already introduced by Ivo. So the very first one, innovative vaccines, they would refer likely to any of the points in the slides, to modernize or update the old vaccine ranges, implement, use the new available or relatively new available regulatory tools, and especially in the current regulation. And we will refer to a couple of examples specifically for this one: the use of mRNA technology, next generation vaccine approaches, vaccine platforms, new delivery systems, example, the use of nanoparticles, new adjuvants and immunomodulators, vaccines against parasitic diseases. And as I said, I will focus on a couple of examples of the implementation, I think, and we think the successful implementation of new regulatory tools existing in the current regulation. I won't go into detail of them, and there will be a presentation tomorrow from a representative from industry telling us their experience in the use of these tools. But briefly introduce them so you can see the definition in the screen. I'm not going to read it. There is a centralized evaluation procedure handled by the agency through the CVMP. And at the end, there is a certificate that is issued valid throughout the European Union for any authorization route. Then this certificate, of course, can be used to support future applications for vaccines containing the same antigen. So what are the benefits of using this regulatory tool? For the applicant side would be the single dossier to be handled by applicants. And from the regulator side, a single assessment from the authorities. There is, of course, there will be a speed-up assessment process once the BAMF, let's call it, is used again. It won't be reassessed, and of course, increase predictability for both sides. There is some procedural guidance that you can find in the agency. The CVMP has produced guidelines for procedure and for scientific assessment. And in the last year, there has been 9 certifications issued for this. So we can see, I think, you can see that it has been a successful tool that is being used in practice. And the next one is the vaccine platform technology master file. Again, you can read there is a definition in the regulation. What is this tool? Again, centralized evaluation procedure handled by the agency as part of an initial marketing authorization as a standalone procedure. At the end, there is a certificate issued that is valid through the European Union for any authorization route. And this will be able to, it can be used to support future marketing authorizations for vaccines based, obviously, on the same platform. Again, benefits, single assessment, single dossier to be submitted, speed up of the assessment procedure, the data is not going to be reassessed. And of course, this fosters the use of platforms for development of vaccines. So it's an innovation tool in place. And of course, it's going to increase predictability. Again, there is some guidance available. And in the last year, 2 certifications were issued. So the next area for innovation, of course, is going to be the area of novel therapies and technologies. And Jacqueline is going to focus on that. So she will go in detail on this. I just added to the slide a reminder of what is the definition in the regulation of novel therapy. And there are specific examples that you can read. But then there is one at the end which is a bit more tricky. We could say about on the interpretation. They could be a bit more, a bit less defined, let's say. So I'm going to refer later to how we can, address this potential issue. Of course, novel technologies, and I won't focus on this area because we haven't seen that many coming our way, and I think it will need a bit more of a specific discussion on this topic. But I have added some examples that could be considered as novel technologies. So focusing again in the novel therapies, just to remind that they can be classified in different type of products depending on are they biologicals, no, and you can read it there. And I wanted to highlight that there is one document now that was produced by the CVMP last year and is published in the agency website, Questions and Answers of Classifications of Veterinary Medicinal Products. There is a tree that can be followed for anyone developing a product who is not very sure of is that going to be an immunological, biological, yes, no, or even a novel therapy. In this case, it's very difficult to provide a definition of what is a novel therapy, but then in any doubt, we would advise anyone to contact the agency and we can consider it case by case and take it actually for a discussion and agreement at the CVLP level. So that is going to be clear. And why is that important? Because depending on the type of product, there may be specific requirements that are additional to the standard requirements for a classical, let's say, medicinal product, or there may be deviations from the requirements in the annex when it's scientifically justified. Then to address any data gaps or uncertainties at the time of authorization, there may be also the need for post-authorization measures to be implemented, which could be studies or other type of measures. And this will be decided on a case by case after the assessment of the product. And also to point out that there is a need to provide a risk management plan with the dossier for a novel therapy. In any doubt about this, because it's relatively something that we are all learning to handle, please contact us and we can guide you on this. Then the next area I wanted to touch on would be the novel approaches to meet unmet needs. So this would be the use of innovation to address unmet needs. I think Ivo also referred to this, and of course then we had the national approach. So this could be aimed to, address rapid response frameworks for emergency disease stress, so emergency preparedness to be ready when something emerges or re-emerges a disease, and targeted solutions for therapeutic gaps in minor species or minor markets. And I'm going to give an example in this area. Alternatives to combat antimicrobial resistance and antiparasitic resistance, environmentally sustainable products, formulations and delivery, and of course the One Health approach. And each of these could be a specific session. So I'm not going to continue on that. I'm just going, as I said, give an example, which is going to be in the area of limited markets, minor markets, availability of products for limited markets. I think everybody's aware now of Article 23, which are applications for limited markets, that they are products aimed for diseases that occur infrequently or in a limited geographical area, or for a species other than those in the slides, which we call minor species. This is a marketing authorization that can be granted if the benefit of the availability outweighs certain risks, certain gaps in safety and or efficacy data. There is a validity limited to 5 years, which is renewable, so there would be a reassessment at the time. Just to say that eligibility is to be confirmed by EMA, and you can contact us. We have a procedure in place. Also, for national authorization, it has been agreed that the CVMP EMA would lead on that. Yes, it's voluntary, but I would highly advise everybody to request eligibility, because then the procedure and the process is going to be much more straightforward for all parts. And also wanted to point out that the validity of the outcome, of the classification outcome, is going to be valid at the time of the eligibility request. So I mean that there's certain predictability, but at the time of submission, there will be a re-evaluation on the eligibility for this type of authorizations. Then what is the benefit? Well, there is some data requirements. So there is, as I said, certain predictability. So there is some data requirements that may be lifted for safety and or efficacy. I refer here also to those products that are not eligible under Article 23, but are aimed to minor markets, minor species limited markets. There is also some flexibility data on requirements. And during the last 2 years, the CVMP has been very busy producing guidelines for different types of products on different areas, efficacy, safety, also on quality for minor, for Article 23 and no Article 23 products. So their guidance are available. Also point out that the reflection paper on eligibility is under revision currently. So if in any doubt and any questions, contact us, I would say, please, because we can help you with any questions and any products. And some numbers I think are interesting. In 2022, there were 13 products confirmed as eligible for Article 23, another 13 in 23, and in 2024, 11 products. So I think it's also quite a positive data set. Let's hope that we can continue that trend. And then the last one, and I think Ivo also referred to regulatory innovation. I, just pointed out some of the areas that innovation could be applicable or relevant for in the regulatory field. New regulatory tools and pathways for faster approval. You have there, the use of big data, real-world data, real-world evidence, AI applications. We haven't seen that much coming our way, but there are more and more. We know that companies are working in those areas, and we will have at some point the network will have to address it and handle them and make good use of them. Of course, the One Health approach, collaborative frameworks between industrial regulators, flexible approach for novel therapies, and we will see more and more coming, and they will be case by case, so they will need a tailored approach. Improve processes to remove administrative and regulatory burden, if possible and necessary, and regulatory efficiency and predictability. So what we have in place to support innovation, and I think I like the graph on the right, it represents more or less the path of thinking when an innovative product is going to be developed. And here, one by one, I would say, first of all, early inquiries through the Ask EMA, very general regulatory inquiries that anyone can send through the website of the agency. We heard about pipeline and also portfolio and technology meetings with industry. These are very important for us. It gives us an idea of what industry developers are working on, but also the potential challenges, so we can have the network prepared and start discussing before we get them. I have also added ITF meetings, academia liaison and SME office, but I have them in gray because they will be discussed more in detail by colleagues, so I'm not going to touch on them. The next one would be guidance and guidelines available on procedural, regulatory and scientific issues, and I will give you some numbers in the next slide. Of course, scientific advice at later stages of development. It could be, most of them are pre-submission of the dossier, but it could be even during evaluation. And my colleague Vladimir will refer also to the parallel scientific advice, which is very interesting with the FDA. And pre-submission meetings, which are more at the final stages of development and product-specific. And as I said, some numbers and information on these tools and these structures and how they are being used. In 2024, there were issued 27 scientific advice reports, 7 for immunological, as you can see, 12 for non-biologicals, 8 for biological, non-immunologicals. 14 of them claimed to include new active substance, and they included companion animals, and higher number, and food-producing animals. Regarding pre-submission meeting last year, we held 13 meetings, including pilots. That's a very high number compared to previous years, and we think it's also due to the innovative approach or innovative characteristics of the products being developed. And an additional 7 written responses to some inquiries on product development. We think they are very useful for industry and for us as well, and they help a lot. So I would really encourage all of you to consider them. And regarding guidance and guidelines, since to be prepared to the implementation at the time of the new regulation, since July 2021, the CVMP produced more and published. They are published more than 22 guidelines. They are more being developed in different areas, and you can see there different working parties. And my final point, just in key regulatory considerations, as you can see, I think they're important to consider early planning, so regulatory requirements being considered very early in development, adequate preparation for the regulatory process, collaborative approach, of course, early communication, address data gaps in available guidance, but also to have clear regulatory support to provide as much predictability as possible, and especially for innovative products. But also increase awareness of the available support, because it may not be all known, and of course make efficient use of that available support. And that was my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noemi. And I can see that in the chat already we've received quite a number of questions. So on that questions in the chat, I will approach it in the same way as in the previous session, which is the questions that received the most numbers of thumbs up will get priority over other questions. And then the remaining questions that we cannot address will be dealt with in writing. I would like to move to the next topic on the agenda, and for that, Jacqueline Poot will take the floor. Jacqueline has worked with industry, but then moved to the regulatory side, and she's taken on several roles. She's been a CVMP member for the Netherlands since 2020, but already before that, member of the Scientific Advice Working Party, alternate. And she's the chair of the Novel Therapies and Technologies Working Party, which since 2021, you're the first chair, I think, of that since it was established. And Jacqueline will bring us up to speed with guidance developed by the Novel Therapies and Technologies Working Party. So, Jacqueline, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Ivo. Well, also Noemi has already provided some introduction on this, so I'll go straight into the next slide. So actually, this was also already mentioned by Noemi. So the novel therapies include, as are listed, they are listed like this actually in the regulation. So gene therapy, RNAi, regenerative medicine, blood products, phage therapy, nanotechnologies, and these nascent fields. I'm going to try to talk you through what is there already and what we are working on in respect to guidance. Here I have also included guidance that had been produced earlier by the Advent group. And that actually also includes a guidance on monoclonal antibodies. These are not listed, these are not regarded as novel therapies, but they are innovative medicines. And there seem to be a lot of questions around these type of medicines. So this is why I also will highlight later on in this talk this question and answer document and what you can find there. And they also produced question and answer documents on cell-based products, several aspects, as you can see. And then when the Novel Therapies Working Party started, we developed guidance on potency tests for cell-based therapies, because that was missing from the Advent question and answer documents. And we produced a guideline on bacteriophages. What we are working on at the moment is the guideline on safety of nanomedicines for veterinary applications. There is, as you may be aware, a work on the VICH guideline on target animal safety for monoclonal antibodies. And we are in the start-up phase for guidance on RNAi and antisense products. So I hope you will believe that with every paragraph that we write in those guidelines, we try to provide predictability without being prescriptive. That is difficult for any guideline, but it's even more difficult for guidelines that are trying to predict the future. And actually, I was sort of worried about having to talk to you for 20 minutes about guidelines. But then my partner said, well, you can always tell them something about yourself to fill up the 20 minutes. And then I thought, well, this is about sort of predicting the future in your guideline. And actually, I have a hobby that is quite the opposite, because I try to recreate the past. This is me doing the 14th century with my friends that join me in that. So this is the whole family. Yes, that's me, the one in the blue dress, yes. Okay, back to business. Okay, so I will start out with this, highlighting some of the aspects of the monoclonal antibodies question and answer document that was produced before my time, so to say, by the Advent group. So there is really interesting points in this guideline, or it's a question and answer document, but for instance, on physicochemical properties of monoclonal antibodies, where the activity is based simply on binding of an antigen, then information on primary structure, together with an appropriate biological assay, may actually be sufficient to define those properties. And then on demonstration of biological activity, methods used could include cell culture, biochemical assays, or immunoassays, like an ELISA. And where appropriately validated, a single potency assay could be sufficient. When we're talking about immunological properties, so it depends on the proposed mechanism of action of the antibody, but actually a one-time in vitro assay to assess antibody-dependent cell-mediated cytotoxicity or complement-dependent cytotoxicity may be appropriate. When we're talking about purity and impurities, consideration should be given to establishing product-specific specifications, obviously, for routine testing, and also for process-related impurities acceptance criteria. And the question and answer also has information on assessment of safety, so on target animal safety, issues on safety in breeding or pregnant animals, adverse effects on the immune system, and how to evaluate off-targets and unintended targeted effects. It's a really interesting question and answer document, and I would advise anyone working with monoclonal antibodies to have a look there. Then we get to the first guideline that was actually written by the Novel Therapies Working Party, which was the potency test on cell-based therapy products, because at the time we had quite a bit of difficulties with that. Evaluation of potency has a key role in defining the quality of a cell-based product. And we acknowledge that it is difficult to uncover the mechanism of action and therefore to determine critical potency attributes. However, a mechanism of action should be defined in the marketing authorization application. We think it's very important to start early with the development of the potency assay, and use of several assays during development studies is encouraged, so to make sure that you end up with a proper potency assay. And the final choice of the assay should be based on a link with clinical efficacy or the mode of action. And that can be based on bibliographic data, in vitro assays, proof principle studies, clinical trials, or any combination of those. And as a final point, a validated potency assay should really be in place at the latest before the conduct of the pivotal clinical trials. when I'm working from home, I have this audience sometimes. This is the view from the desk. But then sometimes he sort of kind of loses interest at some point and finally totally shuts down. But I just to reassure you that we're halfway now. So I hope you bear with me for the rest of the guidance. Okay, so we go to the Quality, Safety and Efficacy of Bacteriophages guideline. We affectionately call it the book, this guideline, because it's a very thick guideline. But there's lots of interesting information in there. But actually, some requirements for bacteriophage products are already laid down in Annex 2 of the regulation. For instance, these are quotes from that document that a fixed qualitative and quantitative composition of bacteriophages will not be the usual situations, as phages need to be adapted. So based on this, a seed stock of bacteriophage strains would need to be established and maintained for a product. So it would be necessary to choose the suitable strains against the disease-causing bacterial strain on a case-by-case basis for the individual outbreak of the disease. And this, I think, is a particularly good one. Indication shall be for prophylactic, metaphylactic, and/or therapeutic treatment. So this is all actually in the annex. Then in the guidance, as was referred to in the previous session, veterinary medicines composed of bacteriophages produced by so industrially manufactured, these are in the scope of the regulation. So authorization of products with a flexible qualitative and quantitative composition is expected to require suitable scientific knowledge. You should really know what you're doing, risk-based approaches, and appropriate quality risk management and pharmaceutical quality systems. So what we anticipate are flexible phage products containing phages from a larger library. Clinical data can be generated using a representative preparation, so with only a few phages from this library. And validated in vitro characterization of phages is important to bridge this data, this clinical data, and for risk profiling. So post-approval change management protocols can be included as part of the application for the parent product. And guidance is also provided on variations, including, for instance, addition of trained phages to a library or addition of a change management protocol. So this guidance on bacteriophages was developed taking into account the monograph that was then a draft monograph on bacteriophages, evaluation of phage product as performed by EFSA, and the development of the new GMP guidance. Then I leave with the future guidance, so what we are working on now. The guideline on safety of nanomedicines for veterinary applications is in an advanced stage. The concept paper has been published, and the guideline we are still working on. It is to cover all safety aspects, so target animal safety, user safety, consumer safety, and environmental safety. And it should cover all types of nanomedicines, so whether the nano product is the active substance, is an excipient or a carrier, or the adjuvant. And finally, we've just started work on a guideline for probably quality and safety of RNAi and antisense technology. The expert group needs still to be established, and that will also put together the exact scope and also the timing until the concept paper will be available. So that is in very early stages. And finally, what we have not started work on is there should be guidance drafted by the Novel Therapies Working Party in collaboration with the Pharmacovigilance Working Party on post-authorization measures for novel therapy products. We've already heard it from Noemi. This is a quote from the guidance to applicants. You may have read it, which talks about post-marketing authorization studies as a possibility and also a risk management plan for novel therapies. Yes, and that was it for today, for me at least. That's yours, yes. No.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for a very comprehensive presentation and also showing a bit of your private life. I think it was very much appreciated. I would like to move on to the next presentation, and the questions keep coming in, so we'll try to deal with those. Next presentation will be given by Vladimir Krukovsky, who is a scientific administrator in veterinary biologicals and emerging therapies, and he is working as secretary of the Veterinary Scientific Advice Working Party and supporting the Innovation Task Force meetings and also product classification. So he's very close to where the innovation is first entering the agency on the veterinary side. And Vladimir is going to inform us about the myths and that exist around EMA, FDA, parallel scientific advice. That's what my understanding was, Vladimir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's not going to be only myths, it's going to be facts as well, as I hope. And as Noemi already touched on, we have multiple tools to help the innovation. And this is one of the tools. You are all familiar with scientific advice. This is a subtype of scientific advice which has recently been tweaked. So we thought this was a good opportunity to bring it to your attention what the changes were and try to really allay some of your worries that we learned about in the survey that was about which I'll talk later. So I will talk about the aims of this procedure and give you a bit of a short overview of its history and talk about the principles of this procedure. And in the last part, yes, I'll turn to the information that we got from you and I'll try to explain what the procedure is meant to be, and hopefully your worries will be smaller after this. So it is parallel scientific advice with FDA's Center for Veterinary Medicines is primarily a mechanism for communication between EMA and FDA assessors between themselves, but also with the applicants. And this is supposed to happen at the early stage of the development of veterinary medicinal products so that any problems can be fished out already at an early stage. So the goals are really to start the conversations at the beginning of a life cycle of a product, and for you as applicants to gain deeper understanding of the basis of regulatory decisions, because there might be not one but two bases, and because there will be two scientific advices issued. This is done in order to make the product development optimized, to make it more efficient, because the last thing you probably want is doing unnecessary studies or having studies with unnecessary endpoints, or having to develop unnecessary testing methodology. So this is what the process is meant to avoid. In terms of history, the first advice issued in response to parallel scientific advice request was issued in July 2011. So it's a procedure which is almost 15 years old. In the next 3 years, we got one request each per year. And then after that, it went silent. And when the corona pandemic came in 2020, and all of us had time to curl in our chairs in our studies and think about life in general, we were thinking what was wrong with the parallel scientific advice procedure. These initial deliberations then resulted in a survey. Sorry, I have to come back here. In a survey, and I'm sure that many of you came across the questions which were kindly distributed by Animal Health Europe and Access Vet Medicines, and we are grateful for their help with this survey. And in this survey, we asked whether you contemplated applying for parallel scientific advice, and if you did, what dissuaded you from doing so. And also the second question was, what would be the features that would make the parallel scientific advice an attractive option for your company? So with this and with the results or answers that we got, we started our discussions with the FDA's CVM, and they did a similar survey on their side. And we started looking together what to change, what to tweak in the procedure in order to make it an attractive option and to increase the uptake of this procedure. These efforts then resulted in June 2024 in the slight modification of procedure and tweaking of the general principles, and that was published on the websites, and it can be found both on CVM's website and our website. And these principles are that, of course, as scientific advice, the regular scientific advice, the parallel scientific advice remains voluntary procedure. The way it works is that you would contact both the CVM and EMA, and we must have agreement between ourselves that we would accept the request as a parallel scientific advice. Of course, for parallel scientific advice, you would need to be developing a product that you aim to place on both markets, in both jurisdictions, and the questions you intend to ask must be scientific. It is what it says on the box, must be scientific advice. Then it would be a 90-day timetable. We were thinking whether we would be able to squeeze it into a 60-day like the regular scientific advice. But because there are meetings between FDA and us and also meetings with the applicant, this wouldn't be practical. So we had to go for 90-day timetable. This is usual. I mean, as usual, there might be, we don't know what we are getting in the questions until we actually receive the questions. So if there is a problem that we need to discuss with different instances or discuss with the European Commission, for example, a clock stop can be introduced. Of course, we are trying to avoid this whenever possible, but it is still a possibility. The process is confidential. We have a non-disclosure agreement between the European Commission, EMA, and the FDA. So any data that you let us know will be kept secret and will be treated as commercially confidential information. What was in the feedback that we received and what was possible to implement in the procedure was the trilateral meetings. Several answers called for these meetings for a chance for the applicant to explain their position. This is possible, and that's why it was built in the process. And in the second half of the procedure, there is a trilateral meeting where the representatives of CVM, EMA's Scientific Advice Working Party, but also Committee for Veterinary Medicinal Products meet with the applicants and they discuss their feedback and applicants' positions. At the end of the procedure, there are 2 advices issued. That said, these advices can be very similar because the name of the game is harmonization and convergence whenever it is possible. Nevertheless, the 2 organizations, agencies will be issuing their own advices, their own reports. If there is any difference in our advice, that will be pointed out in a separate text so that it's clear what are the differences between the 2 agencies. Money-wise, the fees remain exactly the same as they would be for regular scientific advice, meaning they still depend on the areas in which you ask questions and whether you have any financial incentives or not. So the bottom line I would really like to emphasize is that the parallel scientific advice is there to, if possible, achieve harmonization and convergence. At the end, both agencies very frequently work from the same VICH guidelines. So the room for differences in opinions is relatively narrow and small. Now, the last part of this brief talk is going to be about the feedback that we got from you and hopefully allaying the worries that you have. In one of the responses, we got the answer that PSA makes development design difficult without having to ignore the advice of one of the agencies, and an applicant can get more than just seeking guidance from each agency independently. we wouldn't quite agree with this view, not that much with the first sentence. We can understand where you're coming from, that if there is one agency says do 2 clinical studies rather than 1, then you would include that second clinical study into the dossier of the agency who didn't require the second study. But the fact that there are going to be 2 scientific advice reports gives you room to follow that advice in that territory. Also, the view that getting more by getting a separate scientific advice is not something we would agree with, and I hope that the answers to some other comments will make this clearer. Another comment was that the outcome would be the lowest common denominator or highest restrictions, and I think it's quite the opposite, because really the regulators are not here to get you. The aim is to achieve harmonization and convergence. If this is not possible, an explanation will be provided why it's not possible. The next comment went along the same line and expressed worry that there will be more restrictive advice which will prevail, and that the less restrictive agency will have to align with the requirements of the more stricter one. There is higher chance actually to achieve harmonization and convergence of advice when you talk to both agencies at the same time. If you talk to them separately, they will not know that you are applying for the scientific advice from the other agency as well. So the chance is that you are standing a higher chance when you are doing it in parallel scientific advice, and on top when you have a chance to talk to the regulators. Lastly, the last worry I wanted to address is that the third agencies may request parallel scientific advice documentation, and this could create hurdles for global registration, assuming it's in the third countries. And again, this is incorrect. The data are shared between us and FDA, but they are not shared with third agencies. After you have authorized your product, there is a thing which is called access to documents, that the public can request the documents. But these documents from scientific advice are treated as commercially confidential information. If we do get such request, we would be consulting with you whether we can release that document at all. So I think you shouldn't worry. What is between FDA and us stays between FDA and us. So that's it for this short talk. In the absence of any interesting hobbies that I have, I'll have to finish here, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Well, thank you very much to all speakers, and also for keeping to time, because it gives us over 20 minutes for questions and answers. And I would like to go first in the room if there are questions, and then we take the questions online. I see there are questions there. So, Roxanne, you're first again. Go ahead.
I was the only one, but well, thank you very much. It's always interesting as a non-regulatory person to listen to all this. But I have a question to Noemi. In your slide on regulatory innovation, you mentioned the One Health approach. Can you elaborate a little bit what this means concretely, using the One Health approach in innovation? Thank you.
Well, I'm going to pass that question to Ivo. Very kindly. That's because he's more involved in these activities than I am.
It was your slide, Noemi. No, I think the general question to that is that more and more we will approach things in a One Health approach. And innovation, when you look at AMR, for example, AMR and the objectives that we have in the veterinary regulation on the reduction of antimicrobials do ask for having newer therapies available that can replace that reduction in the use of antimicrobials. I've always said when we were looking at the vet regulation that in itself is a driver for innovation. And you could also look at emerging diseases that are a driver for innovation. So I think we should see it in that context. but also in translating concepts from the human side to veterinary medicines. I think that's another way to look at it. So for me, One Health is also now mentioned in our multi-annual work plan, in the strategies, the network strategies of the regulatory agencies. And ultimately that translates into what do we have available in terms of medical countermeasures for health crises, and that could be both public health crises or veterinary health crises that come our way, from the environment, human to animal health, or animal health to human health. I trust that at least answers your question to some extent, Roxanne.
Hello, I'm Marco Hoyer from MSD Animal Health.
Marco, yeah.
Ivo, you mentioned the possibility to have business pipeline meetings with EMA, and that the correct contact person for that would be Noemi to ask for such a meeting. We might have an interest to present our product portfolio from time to time, so we can make use of that.
Yeah, the offer stands. So contact Noemi, and we can organize that. When you say from time to time,
not every year.
maybe to explain it a bit, what we do during these pipeline meetings generally is ask indeed companies to provide an overview of what their product portfolio is, what they have in development, different stages of development.
Yeah.
When they expect they will come to us with a specific product, so that we can take that into account for our planning as well, and to flag up where they see regulatory issues. It's not there to replace scientific advice.
Sure.
So the meetings are informal meetings. They will only be attended from the side of the regulators by EMA staff. So we generally don't invite people from the network into those meetings, also to ensure that confidentiality of those meetings is guaranteed.
Yeah.
And we cannot publish it here. Of course, we cannot say we've had the meetings with these companies and these are the interesting developments that they've presented. But it is for us an important source on getting grips to what sort of innovations may come our way in due time. So, yeah.
All what you said is very clear and very much appreciated. Thank you for that.
Dr. Hellman.
Yes, thank you, Ivo. Klaus Hellmann, Agenda. Well, thanks first of all for all the efforts to basically push your innovation. And you may remember that I presented last year in this room as well. And I was wondering, well, it was very interesting to listen to Frank from ANSES on the approaches for phages, which at the same time are considered novel therapies as a centralized procedure. So obviously there are different attitudes of going there. So, and I have my personal view, and we had some interesting meetings with IABS, and they also made some proposals if that is the right strategy. But so there are lots of things where we are basically not really having the right tools in place. And at the same time, I'm wondering, and again, I make reference to Frank there, to the French situation. It's much appreciated that the test permits in France, for example, are relatively straightforward. At the same time, we still have hurdles like import of clinical trial supplies into France while we have a free market. And that is existing for 25 years, and it's the only country where we have that bureaucratic hurdle. And there I come to the other topic, that we have a lot of added bureaucratic hurdles seen in the last couple of years after the implementation of the new regulation. In a way, of course, every guideline adds also some bureaucracy. Latest one comes more out of CMDV, of course, the initiative of having kind of a, I call it a decentralized procedure to obtaining test permits. But of course, it is not really, for me, it's not an innovation, but it's rather a delay of innovation. And of course, most of our innovation comes from small and medium enterprises until they are then maybe acquired by some of the larger companies. But for all of them, time and money is the major argument. And it's very difficult to persuade the investors to basically to invest in animal health, although it's getting better and it takes some effort. But I think we need to look at the same time, wherever we establish guidelines, on the added bureaucracy that we are implementing. And there are various things I reported, as I said last year, on the GMP requirements, on various other topics. So this is not helpful. And I think we should consider that at the same time, while we, at the same time, and I appreciate that, try to put certain things in place. But at the end, it often ends up in added efforts that need to be taken. And we should be very careful about that.
Thank you very much for that statement. You mentioned clinical trials, which we all know is under national remit. So I'm afraid not much we can do there. But I recognise the problem. For me, and I think this is the intention with guidelines and the development of guidelines. Our intention is to provide regulatory clarity on what are the requirements that we see being put in place for those particular products. They should not, by definition, create additional hurdles or certainly not additional bureaucracy. But I can imagine that it may be perceived occasionally in that way. Any specific question that you had for me, Klaus? Because that's...
No, not on the topics that you presented. Okay. Very well.
Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you. Rutendo Manurara, Elanco Animal Health. My question's around the parallel scientific advice. So you mentioned that it's an opportunity possibly for harmonization and convergence. So just to try and understand what happens, is the intention then that the agencies will have that initial discussion to try and land on that before the tripartite meeting, or is the aim the tripartite meeting to harmonize?
Yes, based on the questions, they will prepare, as usual, draft scientific advice responses. Then they will discuss these responses between themselves, CVM and EMAs. CVM, well, Scientific Advice Working Party members. Any issues where they see the differences would be, they will attempt to come to a convergence. If this is not possible, it will stay separate. Then they will say, well, okay, there are issues on which we can't agree, and that will stay there until the trilateral meeting. Trilateral meeting is after the bilateral meeting. There they discuss it together with the applicant, and the applicant will have the opportunity to bring in their views, their positions. At some points, it will be possible to sway them to converge onto a single opinion. In some cases, it will not be possible. But that's the sequence of events.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to take a few questions that were put in the chat. Let's start with the top question that we have on screen right now. Has EMA shared the concept of the vaccine antigen master file to other countries, such as USA or Asia countries? And how do they understand this concept within the regulation to register new products? We may have shared the concept with certainly with the FDA, as far as I'm aware, even though they're not working on the vaccines. USDA, we don't have and it's a question that we see lower on the screen. With the USDA Center for Veterinary Biologicals, we have no confidentiality agreement, and we don't have regular meetings with them, as we are aware. So I am sure that they have noted it. I don't know whether they will follow this type of approaches. So I would say for now it's a Europe-only improvement, innovation on the regulatory side. I don't know if any of the colleagues would like to add on that. So the vaccine antigen master file and the platform technology master file will only work indeed in Europe. So it's not yet built into any regulatory approach. Frank, you wanted to respond to that?
Not really to respond, but we have a strong cooperation with our colleague from China and the IVDC, and they are willing to hear about this technology and what are the news. I don't know what does that mean, if they want to implement it or they just want to have the concept. I think we have made 2 years ago a very slight presentation, and they asked for a broader approach, and because when we made the presentation, it was not completely implemented in European regulation. But now that we have 2 examples, I think we can try to make some presentation more in depth and see what is their reaction.
Okay, thank you. But that's a national initiative between France and China, I understand.
Yes.
Thank you. Klaus?
Sorry again, but I had a meeting earlier this week with the head of CVB. So I would guess they are in the same situation as EMA, that they wish to drive innovation. And and the question from me would be, are you interested to set up that kind of relationship? Do you see an interest in there? Obviously, there are quite fundamental differences between the regulations on vaccines in the US as compared to Europe, but there's a lot in common as well.
I spoke with Geeta during the VRCH meeting. We discussed at that point in time that we were interested, both sides, to, let's say, come to a stronger relationship between EMA and the CVB. It's been on my wish list for a long time. And with the new CVB director, I saw that opportunity. Current situation in the US is such that I'm not following up on any of this, because I think it will not land anywhere. And the situation, and there's one thing I need to explain here as well. EMA cannot set up a confidentiality agreement. The confidentiality agreement is between the European Union Commission and another authority. So we can initiate and express the wish, and we can start looking into it. But ultimately, it's the decision of the Commission on whether such a confidentiality agreement will be signed, and whether there's more progress. I think we can. Okay, that question is already gone. So parallel scientific advice as well. We cannot have it with the USDA CVB in that sense. I would like to move on to the next question. Most of the products of concern for unmet need and conditional pathways need to meet the urgent requirements of Article 25, or the novel therapy definitions as nascent to the field, so that leaves us no options. I don't know who us is in this case, but how do we address this? And for this, because this is a topic that I understand has been discussed before, I would like to give the floor to Emily. Emily, please.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'll just start with the basic premise that we shouldn't forget, and that Christina reminded me of. We do have Article 8, so there is always the option to apply for a standard marketing authorization via Article 8. I think where the question is driving at is, and I think it's building on the previous question, what are the options for accelerated, or for a leaner process, or for a rolling review? And for perhaps starting with I've heard various things put forward at times, perhaps trying to come to market with a proof of concept study and then feeding the data as we go along. I think it's an interesting discussion point, but in the interests of regulatory clarity, I think we have to acknowledge that conditional marketing authorization and rolling review simply isn't on the menu for something that doesn't fall within exceptional circumstances. To the best of my knowledge, the EMA has only ever adopted that approach for the COVID vaccines. So if we are talking about, for example, a product in a major species for a chronic condition, it is unlikely that we can unlock the door to the derogations, which are Article 25 or for the novel therapy dossier requirements, that are derogations from the standard requirements for marketing authorization, i.e. the standard requirements to demonstrate quality, safety and efficacy. So we need to be realistic about that. And I don't think we can raise expectations of offering a rolling review, for example, in a major species or for conditions that are not urgent and exceptional. But I don't know if anybody else would like to come in on that. Thank you.
I see no volunteers from our side. Okay, thank you for that. Next question. Both Ivo's and Noemi's presentation quoted the objectives of removing the unnecessary regulatory obstacles to innovation. How? Good question. Is the EMA actively working, and to modify the regulation to remove obstacles that have been identified? Now, let me be clear on this. We cannot change or modify the regulation, and we cannot even take the initiative as an agency to do that. I think the only ones that could be in a position to trigger regulation to change, but we've got a commission here with us, would be the member states or possibly the commission itself, if they really see a reason for that. And when I say unnecessary regulatory obstacles, I think we have not really identified things that are really blockers for innovation. So that would be the first step. I don't know, Lubin, if you want to comment on this, but as far as I know, there's no intention at this moment to really modify the regulation. Please.
So thanks for giving me the floor. Indeed, in terms of intention to modify, there is none, because the regulation is relatively new. It's been in application for only 3 years now. So we don't think that any obstacles have really been identified. So we haven't even seen how the regulation really works. So I think that a time will come, but that will be further down the line, where in light of experience, there will be an evaluation exercise, and that might actually prompt a change. But in any case, yes, the experience gained with the application will somehow guide the Commission on whether to change the regulation or not. But at this point in time, there is no such intention.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question by Frédéric Descamps. Animal Health Europe suggested recently to revise the maternity-derived antibody interference guideline to vaccines to remove one group of animals from the study design. Does anyone dare to take that question? Jacqueline?
I'm also a member of the IWP. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's in the work plan of the IWP, this point. So yes, we will...
For 2025, for 2026?
The work plan for 2025, I think. So we will probably discuss it next week.
The next question, also for Jacqueline. You talked a lot about monoclonal antibodies. Do the CVMP still consider monoclonal antibodies for new approaches as novel therapies?
No, I thought I said that in the talk, but no, we don't consider monoclonal antibodies as novel therapies. However, they are a bit of an orphan in the veterinary field, because we don't have a biological working party. So it ends up that it's sort of adopted by the novel therapies working party, but they are not considered novel therapies.
Okay, thank you. And then I note that Frédéric put in the, but it's gone now again, put in the chat that Australia apparently has also adopted vaccine platform technology master file in their regulation. So I think that's a good thing. Next question is for Noemi. In the slides of Noemi, it was mentioned that eligibility to a limited market classification will be reassessed at submission. Can this be clarified, as it is our understanding that the classification, once approved, would be valid for 5 years? So why, I think the question is, why would a reassessment be done at the time point of submission? And Noemi first, and then we've got Christina who will take that question as well.
Yes, Christina wants to take the question, so it's all yours.
Thank you, Noemi. So it's not the classification that is valid for 5 years, that the marketing authorization would be valid for 5 years once it is granted for a limited market, so under Article 23 of the regulation. But yes, there has been recently, firstly, the GTA was published not so recently, the guidance to applicants last year by the Commission. And also we recently received another interpretation that the classification to a limited market is not valid for any period of time. It is reassessed at submission time and also during later points, and it could even be assessed at the time of the CVMP opinion and up to the point when the Commission decision is issued.
Emily, please.
Yeah. It would be, and the reasons for reassessing it would be if the market situation has changed in the interim period.
Rafael.
Yeah, sorry, one clarification. Christina, thanks for the overview and the recent steps. So what you mentioned is about the limited market and the eligibility to Article 23?
Yes, the eligibility to Article 23.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. So that, because limited market, if you're a limited market species, or if it's very rare, is this being reassessed also at the...
Jordi?
Well, what I wanted to add is that what you've seen on the slides obviously is something that we also are working with recently. So this is quite a new development for us, and we are preparing communication about that. And, you might be surprised by it. I will say that also was, for us, we had to also adjust our parameters about how we were working before with MAMs, how we are working now with limited markets. You will be aware that on the reflection paper on limited markets that we have on our webpage, there is even something that needs to be changed. I think we are considering what to do to update also the guidance on limited markets. So this is a very good example. I think that the new legislation has obliged us also to learn on the doing on how we apply this legislation. And this seems to be one of those outcomes. Obviously, our task as regulators is to provide certainty. I think that this is one of the best things that we can do. And on this sense, we are going to try to communicate this information in a more clear and transparent manner. Thank you.
Okay. Then the next question, that's an interesting one because that is really crossover from practice on the human side, potentially to on the human side. So on the human side, there is a toolbox for solutions document for accelerating the CMC activities of novel therapies to keep pace with the safety and efficacy side. Are there CMC accelerations that can be accepted in the veterinary side? Now, the question is formulated in such a way that I don't know where it's aiming at. So I don't know if anyone can clarify this because I'm not familiar with the toolbox on the human side. I'm looking at the panel here. So can we park this question, please, and then we'll come back. We'll come back to you. That's all I can do at this moment, unfortunately. Next question for Noemi. Modernization of old vaccine ranges that go beyond modernized packaging.
Yeah, no, what I mean is that we see that companies are taking, some vaccines that have been in the market for a long time and exploring the way of making them more modern. And with that, I mean, even using new tools like the BAMF, the Vaccine Master File, to have ranges of vaccines or, updating it bringing it to the current epidemiological situation. So it's just, a way of having authorized vaccines that are more relevant and are more, include more innovative technologies and regulatory tools. That was all.
Okay, and then Frederick has been mentioning that it's not in the work plan, Jacqueline, so you need to... Thanks to all those interesting questions, we were overshooting in the discussions, and thanks to all the speakers for their presentations. Thank you. Welcome to this last session of today, and the format that we've chosen for this is a panel discussion, which means that we'll start the panel discussion here. And then there's opportunity for questions from the floor. I hope we can get a lively discussion. And the topic that we have for today's panel discussion is availability of medicines as a driver for innovation. So the driver is the unmet medical needs and the possibly unavailability of medicines in this particular case. And to bring some diversity to the panel, we've invited a few panel members. Jopke van Hout, whose name was totally misspelled on her badge. So if you see her, because that's not the name in her passport, it's called, in her passport, she's called Adrianne, which is totally, misses the mark. Jopke is a veterinarian who works at the Animal Health Services in the Royal GD in Deventer. And she's a member of the internal welfare body of the Royal GD, chair also of the Federation of Veterinarians in Europe Medicines Working Party, and a member of the expert panel on antibiotics in the Netherlands Veterinary Medicines Institute, SDA. And she will obviously sit here and represent the veterinarians on that side. And then on the far end, we've got Professor Rory Branna. He's been a long-standing member of the CVMP, Dean of the Veterinary Faculty in Dublin, and he was former chair of the CVMP Scientific Advice Working Party. And we used to be the first co-opted members of the CVMP when that was established, Rory, I remember that. Sitting next to each other.
I was trying to train him.
And you see the result, he's not a good trainer. And then with me is Jordi Torren, head of the evaluation
and innovation.
And innovation.
Support department.
Support department, very good. So got innovation in there.
Yeah.
And he has worked at the agency for, dare you say, 25 years?
Nearly 25.
Nearly 25 years. So, I would like to open this panel discussion with a question for Jopke and for Rory. So, ladies first, if you don't mind, Rory. And the question is a bit an open question on what do you veterinarians perceive from experience from shortages and unmet needs in the field, and how do you feel innovation could help and alleviate that? So, Jopke, floor is yours.
Yeah, Ivo, thank you very much. Well, in general, and on behalf of FEE, what we see for the vets as really a major problem, of course, is that lack of availability. We have big therapeutic gaps, different diseases in different animal species for which actually no treatment exists. Additionally, we are facing shortages of essential medicines, and that creates a lot of challenges in daily practice. Actually, regardless of the root causes of these shortages, the impact for the veterinarians and thereby on animal health and welfare, that remains completely the same. And that means, additionally, we lack a lot of clear information on the reason and the duration of these shortages. That is difficult in practice, how to schedule a proper treatment plan. And if we cannot find an alternative nearby, can we find another alternative? What is a good alternative? Additionally, especially with pet owners, it can be quite difficult to explain a little bit about these shortages, as they are pretty often, well, let's say, unsatisfied when you say, sorry, currently we have no drugs to treat this disease in your pet. And I mentioned a question is, what can be good alternatives? And that is a very important question. Can we somehow get some oversight in bioequivalent alternatives? Also for that, we are lacking some oversight and information. Actually, only a few, I should say, countries have a kind of a shortages database, which is already informative, but in most European countries, such a database is not in place. And if you then think about, well, what could be helpful in the field for the veterinarians? Well, in general, let's say a harmonized, transparent approach. Think about things like, can we get some real-time updates on shortages, including some timelines to at least have some expectations? Would it be a possibility to provide kind of a database with bioequivalent or quite similar alternatives? And that you can quickly adapt your treatment schedule in practice. And would it be possible to have at least some regulatory flexibility from a very practical point of view, of course? Because that would allow a rather more swift access to, let's say, emergency use products. There are just some thoughts and ideas from the FEE point of view.
You also mentioned at the beginning unmet medical needs. What would you say are the highest unmet medical needs that we see? So not shortages, but where currently there's no medicinal products available, therapeutic gaps.
Yeah, we have very specific examples. For example, for a specific treatment in fish, but in general, minor species, minor uses really remains an issue. We know lots of examples in, for example, the small ruminants, but we also encounter issues with actually, let's say, older products that are removed from the market and thereby also impose an issue. So it's rather broad.
Okay, thank you for that. So, Rory.
Thank you very much, Ivo. First of all, I can echo everything that Jopke said, so I'm not going to repeat it. So prior to taking on my current role, for just under 10 years, I was the clinical director of a referral university hospital. So again, we're dealing with people in first opinion practice and also people in specialist practice as well. With regard to innovation, what a lot of vets are looking for, I mean, we all know that obviously client expectations have just gone through the roof. And telling clients now that there's no effective treatment is really, it's a challenge. And one of the biggest challenges you actually face in practice for vets, just keeping client expectations under control. Specifically in the areas of innovation, I would say, however, that there are huge gaps, particularly in the areas of things like oncology and immune-mediated disease. So for example, when we're treating, say, immune-mediated polyarthritis or inflammatory bowel disease, again, it's always back to prednisolone or cyclosporin. There's nothing more finite with less side effects that we can use. In relation to oncology, invariably, bar one or two exceptions, we're looking at human drugs. And of course, we don't exactly know the full profile. We rely on small case reports, which of course is never the way that we want to go. And other than lymphoma, we don't actually have a large bank of data. But the one thing is, and this is where it's kind of funny, young vets in particular and residents in training have huge desires to treat everything. And they come to me all the time and say, hey, Rory, I've got a cat with fibrosis of the liver. What can I use? Well, there's nothing, right? There's colchicine, there's DMSO, really old products, which don't even have an indication for this as well. And they ask, why isn't industry addressing this? But it's a bit like years ago when I heard the term angel investor, I thought, what a beautiful bunch of people. And like venture capitalists, they're not going to try to screw every penny out of you. But the reality was they do screw every penny out of you, but they bring you a bunch of flowers, okay? So they just try to lessen the pain a little bit. And the same goes as well. Why is industry not addressing all these areas like oncology or immune-mediated disease? But the truth of the matter is there has to be a return on investment. Because without that, if I asked the honest question to a lot of you guys in the industry, if you went to your boss and said, I have 2 projects this year. One is an antiparasitic for cattle and we'll make $1 million. And the other one is an immune modulator for dogs and cats and we'll make 200,000. Which are you going to be told to go for? And that's just the simple reality of the market. But innovation, and one thing which I think can really help innovation, Ivo, is this. We don't actually have a true idea of the true incidence and prevalence of many diseases in the European Union. So even if industry was looking, where is on the horizon scanning, where's the market of the future? What is the incidence of arthritis in dogs or inflammatory bowel disease in cats? Could it be a market that is worth actually looking at and investing some money in as well? So yeah, shortages, big problem. Very hard when you tell a client, I'm stopping the treatment midway through the cycle for oncology or whatever it might be because I cannot get the drug. That's really poor. But in relation to innovation, we are looking as well to move again into the novel therapies. So a bit like the previous discussion. And then I'd really ask industry, whatever, working with both vets and academia, can you identify the niche areas that actually there's a bigger market than you think there is out there? And maybe it is worthwhile investing, certainly exploring in the first instance. Thank you, Ivo.
So Jory, what can we do as an agency?
Thank you, Ivo. And good afternoon, everybody. So I think that the problems that we are hearing are problems that are not new. We heard most of those problems for a long time. I really like the comment from Rory, indicated that the customers really want more and more. And we obviously during the last years have produced a lot of positive recommendations for new products, but there is still a problem of shortages. On the human side, they seem to be taking during the last month, and I think you can agree with me that this is something we've seen growing at the agency because also new legislation and extended mandate for the agency, but is mostly based on the human side where they have a database. Now they are collecting data. Databases are very complicated in the sense that they require a lot of effort. And I heard that the BSFG, the Veterinary Strategic Force Group, is working on that. And probably together with the FB, which is an initiative that it's really good. Frank presented today also their collection of products for which there is an unmet need. And one thing we can do from the agency is try to facilitate the authorization of some products like limited markets. But we also have a very when we had before MAMS, we had a bit more of freedom of action. Now that we have the limited markets, we have to follow the guidance, and we've produced a lot of guidance. There is no doubt about it. In fact, I was, reflecting when preparing for this meeting that during the last month, we have reduced a number of guidelines that we have produced because we've passed the stage in which the new veterinary regulation asks us to produce a lot of guidelines. So maybe now there is an opportunity for us to focus a bit more on things like unmet needs. I don't know if there is, and I'm very open about that, I don't know if there is any possibility that in the future we could look, for example, at the unmet needs and try to do, I could think about, for example, a list of conditions in which could qualify for limited markets. And then that will give a signal to the industry. But similar to what Rory was saying, we've also seen that in some cases we have identified needs, and then there is no real interest from the industry, basically because the return does not justify, for whatever reasons, does not justify the investment from the companies. And we see that quite regularly. So we also have to accept that our regulatory system has limits. Something else maybe to mention is that I think during the last years, the agency has really tried to improve the opportunities that we give to the stakeholders to come to talk to us. Scientific advice now is something very well implemented into the system. But at the beginning, we had quite a lot of questions about scientific advice. ITF now is also very well implemented. Noemi has explained quite well all the different tools that we have available. And tomorrow we are going to be talking also about academy briefing meetings, which is something which is quite new, and also about the portfolio and technology meetings. And maybe if you have questions about that, I'll suggest you wait until the session for tomorrow. So on the practical terms, and from what Joop was saying, it's difficult for us really to do something that is very specific unless there is the willingness from the industry to come forward with a marketing authorization for us. Nevertheless, we can try to talk to academia. We're improving how we talk to academia. Tomorrow there is a presentation about that. And we're also trying to support the small and medium enterprises. In fact, we've been doing that for years. But we need to have those files coming to us. And they need to be according to our, again, quite strict legislation. I was talking just during the coffee break about colleagues, about the guidance that we've produced on limited market. I can mention that during the development of the guidance for products that are limited markets but not Article 23, we had questions ourselves about which was utility. A colleague from the industry was telling me that, yes, those guidance are useful. And I think that as regulators, what we can try to provide is certainty to increase the number of products that are on the market. I'm going to finish now, Nivo, but maybe to mention the UPD also. The UPD contains all the products authorized in the European Union, veterinary medicinal products authorized in the European Union. I'm not so close to it that I know if you are using it in practical terms or not. It has improved a lot during the last month, and that's thanks to the colleagues who are working very hard at the agency, and also obviously to the member states providing the information. But I think in the years to come, it's going to become a key tool to identify which products are available in Europe. I'm going to stop now. Thank you. Joke, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ivo. Jordi, thank you very much for this clear explanation. And perhaps with respect to what you were mentioning about these therapeutic gaps, it's nice to share that at FEE we decided to develop essential lists of veterinary medicines, actually in the end categorized by species and by European country. There are already in some countries lists like this available, for example, in France, and you probably know the WVA Essential Veterinary Medicines list. And actually there was a very recent report from, I think, the competent authorities from France, Spain, Portugal, and Ireland, if I'm correct, which was also summarizing and giving a very nice overview of gaps. And what we now aim to do at FEE is to develop such a list, as mentioned, for the different European countries by establishing a task force who will first set out some basic definitions and some methodology. Of course, learning as much as possible from the initiatives that already have been carried out, to in the end establish species-specific subgroups. And if you think about species-specific, you have to think about small ruminants, turkeys, rabbits, geese, ducks, and so on. And these subgroups, starting actually with small ruminants, will establish at first a essential medicines list. And I hope that will also help, because it will hopefully provide some guidance to marketing authorization holders, but also to the competent authorities.
The essential medicines list is because I understand that FEE has established a working group that pays attention to unmet medical needs. Is that overlapping, or is the essential medicines list on authorized medicines and the unmet medical needs identifying where there are no medicines available?
Yes, exactly. This is really also a matter of definition. And already when we were preparing, we had a lot of questions. And yes, it is on both, because you want to identify the really unmet needs. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes means there is no authorization at all, or there is an authorization, but not in your country. And this thinking from the veterinarian point of view also is helpful to gain more insights. This is also available in the UPD, but it varies among vets to which extent they are really, handy working with the UPD. But yes, it refers to both.
Thank you. Rory, I was going to come back to you anyway with a question, but go, fire.
No, just a very quick thing on the UPD. The UPD is definitely a work in progress. It's getting better. There's no doubt about it. But when it was first launched, every vet thought, this is the answer to my prayers. I'll find out this product is available in Germany or it's available in France, and I will just order it, and it's going to arrive the next day, okay? Now, that was the theory. Unfortunately, it's not quite the practice. Some days I wish I was German, because I'd be working in a country where there'd be far more veterinary medicines on the market, okay? But I'm not, I'm Irish, and I live on an island, right, on the periphery. And what can be very very difficult to accept with the UPD is you identify a product, but then you can't get a supplier to actually supply it, because you want 6 bottles of something delivered to Ireland. And they say, that order is too small. Like, if you're going to be a regular customer and we'll have 10 grand a year, I'm interested in you. Now, it is getting better. And of course, with the database, it has to be current and live and so forth. There can also be delays, because it depends how some countries actually interpret the regulation as to what they put in place for an import license or who you notify, whatever. And in fairness to Ireland, I have to say they've been very good and very quick on it. But if you're not going to get that medicine for 6 days, it's too late. And then you're really stuck with a situation and a lack of availability. So sorry, that was just intervention on that.
Yeah, I wanted to take a bit of a turn in the discussion, because you mentioned, Jordi, I took note here, market potential. And of course, we all know that there has to be a reasonable return on investment. But if a company needs to make choices, they will go for, where the money is, and there's nothing wrong with that. How could we bridge that gap between what veterinarians like you identify as a real unmet medical needs, where there's no product available at all, and where you maybe have to, balance a few old products, and innovation. So really developing those products, investing in those products, public-private partnerships. Something needs to happen there if we really want to bridge that gap, because otherwise we identify, but there's no management put to it.
Number one thing is information transfer. Okay, so one thing I really like about the university is we have all these talks that go on in the medical school, the biotech school, whatever, and the lunchtime talks where people talk about the research and what they're doing. And you will notice in the audience people who you do not recognize, and they're coming from companies, just to see what's going on, and maybe a market they never even thought of developing. So this transfer of knowledge, number one, is very important. I do think, if I said to somebody about inflammatory bowel disease, they'd say, well, how many dogs and cats get that per year? And other than small surveys, in JAVMA or the JSAP, whatever, okay, with 200 dogs, you don't really know what the true incidence is. And industry has to be guided by hard data. That's the bottom line. It's a financial investment. How long will it take and what will the cost be? Now, what can we do? If you're talking about from the regulatory side, well, of course, with the point out, we have 2 burdens. We have to generate data That costs money. And then we have to get through the regulatory process. And that's where they always put it back in your court. Can you make it easier? Now, let's be honest, folks. They can't just turn a blind eye to the absence of data. We all know that. I'm sure you wish, oh, safety file, who wants one of those? Sure, not always necessary. There are requirements. And sometimes, of course, and this is particularly it, the real market and the real need is in chronic diseases. For many acute diseases, right, the animal's either going to get better or it's death. So, there's a very clear decision point. It's when it's a chronic disease, and we have so many chronic diseases we're now treating in animals, in equine, again, less so obviously in bovine, but in companion animals, it's the rule these days, and that's where the market is. So you might well find that a disease incidence is only 0.5%, but if the dog's on that medication twice a day for 10 years, it seems to me there's a definitive return on investment there. So from the regulatory side, be as pragmatic as you can, but you have to follow certain rules. And from the investment side, guys, I think what my ask is, will industry just come to the party? Maybe the return is not going to be as big as a blockbuster antiparasitic, right, for all the species. But at the same time, it's what the need actually is. And I think if industry works with academia, works with the veterinary profession, works with the regulators, whatever, if everybody comes, the jigsaw is far easier to complete.
Hence your plea for incidence reporting on diseases that may not be considered, big markets, but in reality are bigger than people think.
Absolutely.
No, thanks a lot for that. I would like to know whether there's any questions for the panel from the floor. As your role developer, there's a question there, please.
My name is Rima Ishimbaeva. It's a bit now. I'm a president of Association of Veterinary Consultants. And thank you very much, panelists, for this interesting insights. I just talked with Jobke, and from my organization, I would like to support these initiatives about creation of essential pharmaceutical or vaccine list in Europe. And of course, it was very interesting to know the different opinion. Yeah, of course, it's important that the regulatory burden will not impact this good initiatives. So we will be happy collaborate with in this topic together. Just some words of support. Thank you.
Raffaele?
Yeah, maybe a comment. The challenge here is to ask the question or to make the comment without naming again the wording conditional license to avoid to trigger again the cycle from Ivo to Emily. So I will try.
I bet you can't do it, Raffaele. I bet you can't do it.
Well, let's see if it's possible. But I would like to connect with the last point that the unmet medical need is in a chronic condition. That is very true. And the assessment principle in the regulation are maybe not suitable for assessment of chronic conditions because it's difficult to evaluate long-term effect. And this is where, without using the words, new instruments, new tools are needed in order to ensure that the product is, to demonstrate that the product is efficacious, at least in an initial data set, and then follow up on that. We mentioned previously risk management plans, okay, that are made post-approval for some categories like novel therapies. And then the question may become, not to be answered today, whether it's possible to think at this instrument not only to monitor the risk, but also to monitor the long-term efficacy and safety, of course, of a therapy, which is by its nature chronic, and therefore using the current legislative framework for these new therapies, for which indeed there is unmet medical need, but there is also need for regulatory instruments to go forward.
We did authorize a number of products over the years, chronic pain treatment, diabetes. So it's not impossible to do it for chronic diseases, I would say, based on the data package. Maybe you step in because you're...
To be honest with you, this is one where I actually do think the agency and the CVMP do deserve some credit. The number of lifelong medications that have been licensed based on 60 days of data is actually at times we look at ourselves and say, gosh, we only actually have 60 days here. But if the data sets are clean, They're clean. And then we rely on pharmacovigilance to say, look, if there is a problem in the market, we'll figure this out next year, the year after, whatever. So I don't think we've ever gone overboard by saying, oh, we need 2 years data if you want something that's going to be given for 10 years of the animal's life. And I do think pharmacovigilance can actually be relied upon to address that. So I think, to be honest, they've got the balance right on that one. Now, I know you'd wish it was 7 days rather than 60 days, but there does come a point where you need at least 2 or 3 treatments in a row to show the kind of the reliability of reproducibility of the data.
But Rory, from your clinical experience, because you're primarily a clinician, could you think of chronic disease models where that would be more difficult to defend? And can you think about how to circumvent that then in a regulatory way?
Yeah, look, there are certain diseases where you don't actually know long-term whether or not the response that you've got initially will be maintained. Okay, and those are much more difficult. They are the exception rather than the rule, to be quite blunt. Now, I couldn't actually give you an example without making it obvious what the product was, which I think will not be suitable in this particular case. But I think people in the room know what have some idea of the nature of the product I'm talking about. So sometimes we have requested data that was follow-up that may be even up to 1 year. Now, we can't get away from it. There's no conditional license. And by the way, we also have to be honest, in the US, some of those conditional license procedures have really turned out with bad news at the end of the day, when they suddenly find out 6 months down the road, oh my God, this thing, get it off the market now, quick. So conditional license does come with a significant risk as well. But in the cases, in the vast majority of cases, we do not require data beyond a few months. That's the bottom line. And then we do rely on follow-up measures such as pharmacovigilance to identify those problems. Ones that I can think of, yeah. Unfortunately, the two, as I said, Eva would make it clear what product I was talking about. So I don't think it's going to be appropriate.
Yeah, Jordi, please.
Yeah, one of the things I was, considering is we are talking about innovation here also. We haven't spoken about real world data, and I don't know which will be the relevance of those studies for this type of products. And when we mention real world data on the veterinary side, we get a bit worried because we don't know really the human side. They seem to be really progressing very fast. And because of the size of our sector, we don't seem to be progressing so fast into this area. But I guess that this could be one of the areas where innovation might bring a bit of help into those authorizations. Thank you.
Microphone. Well, Rory is so close, he doesn't need the microphone. One question for you. You mentioned, and I think that's an interesting one, the role here for fundamental and applied research at university, where things are being tested, things are being developed that generate an interest from people, obviously from industry. How important do you think that is, and how would you suggest that link is established in a functional way?
Okay, so there was a very interesting thing with regard to some of the research funding in Ireland over the last 5 to 10 years, where some of the research funders believed, traditionally we gave the money to academia. You go and study something, give some finding and publish it in some journal and let industry cop on, oh my gosh, those guys looked at this receptor and there does appear to be an effect. Some of the funders then said, why are we giving it to universities who are just going off and doing whatever they want to do in the hope that it might generate a job or generate a product that could be patented at the end of the day? Why don't they give the money to the actual company? So if the company went with it defined as we're in the area of oncology and particularly lymphoma, and we are looking for products and blah, blah, blah. Okay, there's a researcher in UCD, big into canine lymphoma, whatever. We will give a research grant to them, but it's a bit like an industry partnership. So no, it was combined. Everybody had some kind of a slice, we call it stake in the game. In other words, everybody was interested because they'd invested time, energy, or money. And that was important as well. So if you get those industry-led partnerships going, whatever, it can be far more focused and more likely to give rise to a product that might be patented or might have a therapeutic indication at the end of the day. Other than that, I noticed the same people. We have a huge number of researchers and a lot of working in areas such as neurology, oncology, and pain management. And literally, you will see the same faces turning up from companies again and again and again. And it might be one meeting in 20 that actually really stimulates their interest. But if you don't turn up, you don't know what's going on. But I think communication is, the industry and communication is really essential for that.
Time flies, guys. We scheduled half an hour for this panel discussion. I think we've easily met that. So I would like to wrap up, unless there are burning questions in the room or online. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Beate Lohr, Elanco Animal Health. I think one point I would like to mention, and which is really critical in thinking how to transfer a good idea from universities, researchers to industry, which should not be forgotten, is the costs of the manufacturing and the scale up, because it's easily said we need a product, a medicine, but if we come and say this costs 300 euros per dose, then we are at the limits. We have not the charming advantage of having insurance for everything paying, like in the human side. So I think it's really critical to keep manufacturing costs down. And it's a huge step from very small scale university manufacturing, if you will, to industrial large size. So this, if we can work on, I don't know, I have no idea yet, but to really smooth this process, which is really huge investment, that would maybe help as well.
Okay, I took a few notes here. I mean, shortages, real problem. You asked for, can we look at biosimilars, bioequivalent? UPD can be a help there, but then there's the issue of how do you get stuff in small quantities of medicines from other countries. In theory, it all works well. In practice, it doesn't. Unmet medical needs, and thank you, Rory, for mentioning a few chronic diseases. There's oncology, where possibly there are unmet medical needs. The market potential taking into account the good return on investment, but also possibly better insight in what the actual incidence is and how that could be helped. Role of fundamental applied research, and thank you, Beate, for flagging that up. When we have ITF meetings with industry, they try to use us as a consultant, and then I say, go to the real consultants, and they can help you. Find a good consultant that can help you, because otherwise they don't consider those issues indeed of scaling up and what needs to be done. And then I think funding is one of those things. I'm not sure there are EU projects trying to look indeed at filling in certain gaps that could be used. They are more and more also looking into what actual feasibility is and regulatory considerations. And we try to be involved with these as well in order to prevent that people invest time and money into what works nice as a proof of concept, which cannot be authorized in the end for different reasons. So with that, I would like to close this session, but give a last opportunity to the panel members to say a few last words, starting with Jopke.
I just want to say that and actually that was also in your summary, in your wrap-up, Ivo, that it is very important that we all keep talking with each other and exchanging our ideas. It's fine to mention limitations or possible burdens, but also try to turn it the other way around. Sorry, that's my personal habit, and say, okay, if we say no to that, how can we turn it into a yes? And that would be my general message. Thank you.
Just the final word for me is, while we have problems and we have concerns, actually, let's just reflect on how far we've come. 15 years ago, we had no stem cells, we had no monoclonal antibodies. So things have moved on. A lot of progress has been made. Yes, there are gaps. And one of the reasons why the gaps are really becoming public knowledge is you've actually raised the bar. And by raising the bar, you raise client expectations. And they expect these medicines. So small clap on the back for what's been achieved so far, and then just try to achieve as much as we can in the future. But yet, major progress has been made. Thank you.
Thank you. So during the last years, as Rory was saying, we received quite a lot of challenging new products, but we always managed, the system has managed to assess those in a very short time. I think we've done some exceptional circumstances authorization during the last months, even in 5 months. So please keep sending us your files. If you want to talk to us, we are open. We are opening more doors, more streamlines in which you can talk to us. I mentioned some of those already, and we are here to collaborate and try to help. One last point, you were mentioning, Ivo, that we are collaborating more with partnerships, the EU partnership on animal welfare and animal law. Something we discovered is that the people out there, they need a lot of regulatory advice, and many times it's provided by consultants, shouldn't be us, but also to tell colleagues that even if your project is subsidized by the EU, it doesn't mean that will be approved by the agency. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for that last remark. With this, I would like to close today's Innovation Day and look forward to seeing you again. And with that, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for the people online, and I'll see you tomorrow.